Signs of Southland, Monday, June 28th, 2021. Mr. Grant, where were you when Atlanta sports struck yet again?
Um, I guess in my new apartment. We were watching on our nice little TV that we got. It was very sad. I'm surprised my Twitter wasn't more angry about the whole ref ankle Trey Young, the happenings of last night. But oh well.
I think someone on Twitter put it best when people were like, Hawks fans are basically Michigan's men's basketball fans, in that the other sports that they root for have hurt them so terribly in the past that the Hawks being good is just icing on the cake. It's playing with house money that just makes them happy, and nothing can really bring them down, even if it's a potentially playoff ending injury for their star player.
Yeah, that's probably pretty accurate. I mean, you're more of a native, I'd say, than me for sure. So you probably know a little bit better, but I don't know. They've at least been fun to watch, and it's only 2-1. The series isn't over, so
I mean, if Young can't go tomorrow because we're recording this the day that on the rest day in between 3 and 4, if Young can't go tomorrow, whew, it's a tough sell.
it's what the kids call not great. And the adults.
Kevin Herter time, says Kevin Herter.
I mean, it's just tough. But like you said, you're playing with house money. The rest of, I guess, the Atlanta summer slate isn't particularly
good
dominant.
for my health.
Yeah. I mean, the Braves have kind of settled into generally disappointing, if I'm reading the room right. And I mean, we could probably have a whole separate podcast for you to talk about Atlanta United, but we don't have to unbox that one either, because I know even less about that than some of the schematic stuff we talk here. So,
yeah, and then the Falcons managed to lose during the offseason, so there's that.
we should probably bring up the vibe. Do we have anything actually like fun to talk about this week, or are we just killing
Yes,
so we can start to
we
pre?
do. We do, and we're starting with women's tennis players and men's tennis players being named to All-ACC academic teams. Tell me who they were, Mr. Grant.
Ava Hrastar, Anders Martin, ACC All Academic. I mean, we kind of pride ourselves on stuff like that, so always good to see them, taking advantage of the opportunity.
Also, I'm very upset because they posted those awards the day or the morning after we recorded and posted an episode last week. Will never forgive the ACC head office for doing that.
It's the old Monday morning news drop,
Instead of the Friday mid afternoon during another sporting event news drop, as everyone is so well known for.
What's better, that or the 2 a.m. mods are asleep, let's kick NC State out of the College World Series?
Ooh. That was a fun one. As Mississippi State and Vanderbilt do be playing on my TV currently. So
yeah, I'm. If we hadn't let in with the Hawks thing, I mean, there might be a 30 for 30 made about this NC State thing someday.
There's probably going to be made 30 for 30 made on this entire 18-month period, if not 24-month period. So at that point, it'll be like 50 for 50, realistically.
Well, they're what, 13 years into 30 for 30 or something like that?
I feel like it's expensive to update that branding every year. Like it costs a lot to trademark 43 for 43.
It also
doesn't roll off the tongue.
Well,
it's just not as good for the brand,
I want you to take a guess. How many 30 for 30s have there been?
43.
No.
Okay, just give me the number. I'm not going to get it.
157.
Okay. Well, I think we have to go 157 for 43 if we want to be accurate now.
Yeah, see that doesn't roll off the tongue at all.
I don't know, just drop a couple vowels and like make it sound tech bro-y. Maybe add NFT to the end, and it'll play.
Turn all the consonant ERs to consonant R, like Tinder, Fighter, other trendy things.
I'm surprised that you missed the most obvious one. Actually, I'm not entirely surprised that you missed the obvious one, but we're
Is tongue
gonna
of them?
sidestep.
I don't
No,
know.
that's not the one I was going for. Uh, it'll hit you eventually. Let's move on. Uh, Men's basketball news starting today. A couple of news items came in. We had Tech announcing that they were hosting Wisconsin in this year's ACC Big Ten Challenge. That will be on December 1st, 2021, which is weirdly rapidly approaching, considering that Thursday is July 1st. And boy, is that weird to say. Incoming transfer Davon Smith was a finalist at with Team USA at its U19 team trials in preparation for a FIBA World Cup. If I remember correctly, he did not make the final cut for the team, but it's good that he was in the mix until the very end. And then coming out of G League camp, there's some pretty good rave reviews about Jose Alvarado and his effort level and his toughness, which is pretty fun to see. Any thoughts here?
I see. I want Jose Alvarado to get the bag. I want him to do so well. But man, do I want to see another year of him at Tech? But no, I think this man works, efforts, whatever, harder than anyone else in the gym, almost certainly, or on the floor. So to hopefully hopefully he gets a chance. Is all I'm trying to say. Like if anyone has earned the right to prove themselves at after hearing from so many people, you're too short, you're not going to make it, you're not an ACC player, et cetera, et cetera. Like risen to the challenge plus some, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Any thoughts on where you think he might land?
I mean, I workshopped this tweet with you yesterday and on Twitter, but
Yes, I'm teeing you up for this, and you're really
part
botching
of
the
my
delivery
Jake
on here.
was commenting on another comment by somebody saying that the Brooklyn Nets need more Brooklyn if they're going to go anywhere, do anything, get to the next level, yada yada yada. They just don't have like the spirit. And if anybody embodies the grit, tenacious, grit and tenacious like New York basketball, it's Jose Alvarado. So
Would you say that the Brooklyn is a grit and grind team?
yeah,
This is a
effort.
deep cut. This
It's
is a deep cut quote.
whatever the area code of Brooklyn is for the culture, you know. But
Indeed. Also, I was making a Memphis Grizzlies reference, but I think you might be too young for that.
it absolutely went straight over my head. But yeah, no, Nets, if you're here, this Jose guy is pretty good. You could use him. But yeah, no, I think his good reviews should pay off, and even if he does decide to come back, like it's not like they're gonna forget about him, especially if you leave a good impression.
Mhm. Speaking of other roster construction matters, Eileen Morales' softball team on campus added a transfer from Michigan, Chandler Dennis, a pitcher with 3 years of eligibility left, having burned 1 year due to COVID and then 1 year this year. Uh, I think she put together 5 appearances. I don't have the sheet in front of me with all of her stats. But what are your thoughts? What are your early thoughts before camp starts?
The first thing that comes to mind is the parallels are super strong here with the volleyball transfer from Nebraska earlier in the month. In the specific case that it's really a commentary on do you trust, and it seems like they do, a known power's ability to attract and scout talent. And whether that is a oh, hey, like we thought this transfer was going to work out. Well, obviously, it's way too early to judge that. Whether it turns out to be a, hey, like it didn't work out here either, sure, that's one thing. But you could also have a, like the current Kyle Schwarber situation where he was always a monster power hitter, but never really was all that consistent. And the man gets a scenery change, and now he has 15 home runs in 17 games. So you really roll the dice on any transfer, but you're adding your own evaluation to the knowledge of Michigan, who again has been kind of the creme de la creme out of the Big Ten in the last decade or so. So um, hopefully that pays off.
Yeah, I think we've talked at length about how the mound is a point of weakness for this team. The performances on the mound,
For sure.
and obviously they have had a lot of turnover at that position even this year. I think they lost 3 or 4 pitchers to graduation. So
Yeah.
even with the extra year given, so it's it's going to be an interesting position. I think that goes for both bat and ball sports, right? How
Mhm.
does the how does pitching evolve in this next year, given a full season, given a full off season, not just a full season of play here, an entirely full off season that's not interrupted by testing, that's not interrupted by um, the various protocols. I assume it's not going to be interrupted by various protocols, right? I think everyone on campus is doing pretty well um, with how things have gone and how the situation has evolved. But some of these things, especially when it comes to the talent that Tech is bringing in, it makes you think, how is the development pathway going to change, going to evolve, going to improve these pitchers as they come on campus?
Yeah. Um, and again, I think some of that's going to improve with, well, I guess Blake Nelman counted as a freshman again last year, who's obviously the centerpiece of that staff. But again, and it's softball, you can get by on having, you don't need a Friday, Saturday, Sunday midweek guy like you do or gal like you do in baseball, but you still need options other than your A1A starter. So again, time I believe will help that, but also there has to be like just whether it's transfers like this or recruiting, and to be fair, transfers in particular, that being Trisha Awald, have definitely been able to make impacts on Georgia Tech softball already in the Morales regime. So hopefully we see something like that, I would say.
Yeah, good point. I actually also forgot to mention a couple of weeks ago that Brianna Roper has also actually transferred out of the Georgia Tech program and over to Ole Miss. So that happened, what, 2, 3 weeks ago? And we just completely blanked on mentioning it.
Yeah, I think it happened like midweek, and so it slipped kind of between the cracks in the the podcasting churn. But I don't know. We'll be sorry to see her go for sure. I believe she worked out of the gates enough as a freshman to be like the team like schedule poster as a sophomore. So if you're basing your branding around certain players, it's going to be tough to see them go before the time is due. But especially now that it's a done deal, there's not a lot you can undo about that.
hmm Let me tell you about basing your branding off of people you think are going to be star players and what is it, the 2016 Braves opening day roster, where they traded like 3 star players right before opening day that they had plastered across all of their branding.
Was that the Andrelton Simmons off season, or was that the Jason Hayward off season?
I think it was like multiple of them. It was like Hayward, Simmons, and Kimbrel were in the span of 2 consecutive off seasons or just the same off season.
Let's see. When did Simmons got traded? Yeah, between 2015 16. I
And I
think
think
Hayward left.
Kimbrel was the day before the 16 was the day before 16 opening day.
Yeah, that's no. I think Kimbrel was right before because I think Simmons was end of 2015, but don't quote me on that. You've been around the team longer than I have, so oh well.
Around the team is a certain way of saying had many traumatic experiences watching the Cobb County baseball franchise.
Yeah, we'll go with that. You said it, not me.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. We're fine. We're okay.
But there's
How
I was about to say, I'm going to steal your transition here, but there's definitely some surefire people you can build around, whether that's basketball, knowing certain players coming back as basically sure things, like Jordan Usher is going to be Jordan Usher, but we also can do that with, football and Parada and baseball and whatnot. So,
Okay, this is why you let me host and you're the omnipresent guest because you had me going with the transition and then you dropped it by mentioning baseball first and not finishing on football and really crescendoing there.
I feel like that's cliche. Are we a cliche podcast?
Yes. Have you met us?
Yeah, I do wear a bit too much of the classic tech white guy ME vibes. So and I am looking at the pocket tees I currently am wearing right now. So maybe you're right on that.
All right, let's do with the awkward transitions and continue on to talking about football, as previously stated. 7 players were named to Phil Steele's all-conference preseason list. On the first team All-ACC, there was running back Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs appeared as a kick returner on the third team, along with linebacker Quez Jackson, offensive lineman Ryan Johnson, long snapper Cade Long, defensive back Wanye Thomas, and then the fourth team had defensive lineman Jordan Dominic and linebacker Ace Ely. My first take on this, in my usual Stephen A. Smith way, because I do that, of course, I think Dominic is a little undervalued on this list. And I don't think he would be on the first team per se, but at least the second. Like I think he would make it on a second team. He played very well last season.
Yeah, I thought he was our best defensive player last year, just from my
absolutely.
I guess more.
I mean, I think
whole gut check right here, but also all ACC teams, I guess, are not made in the vacuum of tech, right? So I perhaps I know that we watch a lot of ACC football, but I do not know enough
detriment
about other teams to be like, yes, there are definitely X amount more than him, and he's in the right spot. But it's a little bit weird to see some names that I'd be like, oh yeah, they're second or third above him on the list.
Look, we all know that all ACC teams are contractually obligated to feature at least 5 Clemson players, 3 Miami players, and a couple of the UNC players. This, it's all written in the language. You got the memo, so did I. It's just that the way that these things happen. But, I would have liked to have seen Phil Steele just bend the rules a little bit, just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, not that the media exists to hype everyone up, because obviously there are certain teams that don't get nearly their fair share or their fair shake in, the public eye. But
don't let those boys at Coast or at Central Florida hear you saying that.
We'll have a lot of people with only cars as profile pictures in our mentions.
Only cars and the athletic, like baseball player sunglasses.
Yes,
the exact ones that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm picturing it in my mind's eye, and I'm remembering
the Oakley fishing glasses or whatever.
Yes. I mean, if we want to keep rocking the boat, we can.
We're moving. We're moving. Continue your thought.
What was I going to say? Like, I just feel like every time these lists come out, they're not all that interesting, exciting, intriguing. I don't see like that many surprising names. I don't know. Like, obviously, you get down a fourth team, and you're like, oh, that's a guy I never heard of from some other team, But I don't know. obviously there's not a lot to talk about in the doldrums of the off season right now when it comes to what the on-field product's actually going to look like next year. But I don't know. Like, I feel like we're just a little bit underrepresented, and I feel like that's not all that unexpected. So it's kind of like, okay, Phil, okay, Mr. Steele and your magazine, great. Like, okay, next.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a symptom of the ACC being so decidedly top heavy to the point
Oh yeah,
where you can pick the champion every single year. You could probably pick Clemson as the champion, the ACC champion for the next 5 years, put a bet on that and have it cash.
oh yeah.
And
Whatever
probably
it
get
is.
really crappy odds for it too.
Mhm.
Right? So I think it's a symptom of that. It just makes the league uninteresting to watch. And I think you can sort of draw parallels to soccer leagues. Like I think France usually is a good example. The French soccer Ligue 1 has been dominated so heavily by PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, sorry, Saint-Germain. I'm gonna
Oh,
mispronounce that.
wow.
I
You
don't
studied
know. I'm
Western.
not French. I didn't study abroad. It's been dominated by PSG for so many years, the better part of a decade, I think almost like 15 years now, that this year it was like a big cause for celebration when that streak was finally broken by upstart Lille. And Lille isn't even that much of an upstart. Lille is also like a big spender and like a big player in the transfer market and a big club and all that, but it's not on the, Middle Eastern nation sovereign wealth funding level of PSG. But I say
Mhm.
all that and explain all that to make the point that Clemson is a Death Star. There's no two ways about it. And when the Death Star is that, is bearing over Alderaan with that sort of threatening proximity, it's kind of hard to notice anything else.
Yep. I would also like to add before we roll on, this is an FC Mets podcast. But yes, Clemson
Boo! They got relegated, I'm pretty sure.
did. I thought they got unrelegated.
Probably.
Ugh,
You,
gross.
okay, you realize number one, there's a word for that. Number two, I have no idea. I'm pretty sure they got relegated though.
Ugh. As a lifelong Mets fan, and not something I decided 5 minutes ago, that is a travesty.
Totally
But no,
not as a humor for a bit.
oh, definitely not. Just like I've been an Austria fan more than the last 2 days. Anyways, Clemson being good in some respects is fantastic for the conference. Knowing that you have a legitimate contender to win a national championship, get in the playoff, get that bag, all that stuff is something that the Pac 12 would drool to have, right?
Yes. As
And
a as a as someone that is a Stanford fan, a very casual Stanford fan, I do agree. Yes.
yes, so, and not seeing Stanford at the top of their game, USC at the top of their game, Oregon, Washington, those are all programs that have in the past competed and been very relevant national programs. Colorado, they have a title within the last 35 years, just like we do. An asterisk on that, fifth down and whatnot, but still, it proves my point. The ACC has programs that can and have competed. Georgia Tech, Florida State, Miami, like the Pittsburgh has like what 7 titles? Like, and granted, some of those are pretty old, like ours, but some of them are kind of newer, like ours. It's just there's not the and Virginia Tech has had national relevance. You get the point where I'm going with this. Like there's the potential that the ACC just never seems to live up to, and just having Clemson as like, okay, at the very least, someone will do something and will be relevant until basketball season starts.
I think the piece of that's most important, at least for I guess our needs, the piece of the Clemson dominance that's most important for our needs is what you mentioned about securing the bag, right? Because Clemson's playoff inclusion, its almost permanent place in the playoff guarantees a certain amount of media rights revenue for the conference that gets paid out to everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at a Georgia Tech Athletic Association whose budget in fiscal year 2019 was made up of media rights revenue that accounted for 23% of the total bucket. So you're really like you're really scrounging for dollars, and I don't think it's a mean to say that. I think it's pretty accurate of what the situation is at the athletic department, right? They are looking for new ways to make money, and as crappy as it sounds, Clemson winning games continues to make Georgia Tech money in a counterintuitive way.
No, I completely agree, and like to an extent, it burns. It is annoying. It is whatever you want to
Oh,
say.
it's incredibly annoying, especially because it's all. Is it like it's incredibly annoying just because the sort of the insular nature of college sports, the sort of in-group, out-group nature of college sports. It's incredibly annoying, but it's also benefiting us. That's why the SEC chant means something, right? There's a level of conference loyalty that sure they have, but that we don't. But at the same time, if you look at their TV contract, every time that Alabama makes the playoff, everyone cashes a check. Everyone cashes a massive check.
Yeah, and I mean Notre Dame being in the picture this year helps us as well, but the thing that comes with that too is, hey, Clemson's good. They're going to get that 7:30 game against whoever, let's say Syracuse. Well, now Syracuse is on late. They have a chance to do something special, and it sucks that like Clemson losing, much like Alabama losing, or other schools that you know sit at the top of these rankings every year, losing is an event, right? If Syracuse were to do something, it would be a lot like the Miracle on Techwood Drive. Not probably the same amount of
Oh, and
like,
it's almost happened
but the
multiple
national
times.
significance of that happening in front of millions of eyes in the entire country, like that, like that's worth something in terms of product and attention and whatnot.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think one of the things that I think the more mainstream media, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, I mean that as a more generalized sports media, college sports media, has been talking about as a priority for the ACC in the next couple of years is to redo their conference media rights deals.
Yeah.
Especially because the payouts are starting to look small in the face of the SEC's new deal with the mouse, and then the Big 12 or the Big Ten's new deal also with the mouse
Mm-hmm.
and Fox. I think mostly with Fox, if I remember correctly. Um, those are the things that and the name of the ACC commissioner, Jim Phillips. Those are the things that he's going to have to take a look at and see, hey, where can we win on the margins here? What can we do with ESPN? How can we negotiate with ESPN and get some better kickoff times, get some better TV windows, and get a better cut of funds for our live sports package? And what does a better and do how does the current quality of the ACC's programs, not just basketball, not just football, but the entire, top to bottom list of programs affect that valuation? Obviously, this is starting to go into sports business territory and more speculative financial money is fake territory, especially when you're dealing with media rights. But this is the next frontier, right? We're starting to get towards some of these media rights deals expiring or being renegotiated. What does the future of the ACC from a financial standpoint, what does the future of the Georgia Tech Athletic Association budget look like in the next 2 to 3 to 5 years?
Yep. Interestingly, speaking of budgets, I was struck by the inspiration to go look at the Are you familiar with the concept of the unit that they pay out for March Madness?
Yes.
All right. So the unit value in 2021 was projected to be 280,000 before COVID-19. That actually went up to 337,000 in 2021.
Hmm.
Not saying that, like, obviously they're giant, not unrecoverable, but the money lost in 2020 will never go away. But I think the same concept behind you want to see, and Passner will gas up any ACC team any day of the week if it gets us another entry in the tournament. But you want to see as many basketball teams get those at-large considerations and get the money. And obviously this year we did our part, and we'll hold on to that unit for another 5 years after this. Well, the conference will, but you get the point. The logical extension of that to football is magnified so many times.
Hmm.
And I think, like, and obviously, this is a podcast that talks a lot about non-rep sports, so we understand the value and the special, like, the joy that comes with, volleyball, women's basketball, baseball, softball, like all these wonderful things. But it every level of the microscope, I think, gets that much more intense as you like click to it, right? And football is the logical extreme of college sports, is it not?
Yes,
And,
absolutely.
and sometimes illogical. So the
The
fact,
financial extreme, the
yeah,
logical financial extreme.
yes, and the fact that Clemson, as we've noted, is so dominant. The last, what is it? When's the last time someone else won? Florida State in 2014?
15.
Okay, yeah,
14 was a Florida State year. 15 was the, let's see, 15 I think was the 14 was the Oregon FSU Rose Bowl.
yeah,
So it would have been 14.
yeah. So the fact that Clemson has been so dominant there, and it's only one team, is again the logical extreme of the sport. And I think it sucks to say, like, be thankful that a rival is good, but like,
Yeah, it could be, I mean, it could be a different rival. And I mean, they're their own level of unstoppable juggernaut, but that's Alabama's, you know, pet to corral, if you will.
again, they they have the equal disadvantage of not even being in our conference, so we don't get money when they do well. But uh, the the logical extreme where I can't place where exactly a good option is either, because you have to change the calculus some way, whether it's, they just added 2 basketball games that doesn't really put much of a dent in a primarily football driven contract. Going to 9 games, well, then your schedule is extremely limited. Adding more teams, well, then the divisions are whack. There's only certain things that are going to up the value of this contract in meaningful ways as we stare, not debt mountain, but revenue gap mountain more and more in the face.
Well, there's Revenue Valley, and then for Georgia Tech specifically, there's Debt Mountain.
Yeah, the old upper north is the not so
The old Upper North construction debt that is somehow still not paid off. But I'm no fiscal analyst, to be clear.
Me neither. That's the engineering economy was only a 1 credit class.
And I didn't even take it, so
I we'll ignore my econ minor. But yeah, no, there's only so much that you can do to change the calculus. So in the meantime, like, yeah, I don't want to see Clemson winning any national championships or North Carolina
ACC softball championships.
Like, that, you want the teams to get deep in the tournament so you get more money, but at the same time, like, oof, there's, it's not even a double-edged sword. It's just kind of like, ugh, gross.
Yeah, I mean that's that's what the conference loyalty bit is, right? Like I said, the SEC chant, there is a fiscal intelligence to that.
Yeah.
Because every time Alabama scores a point in a college football playoff game, it makes Mississippi State a bunch of cash.
Hmm.
So at a certain point, like maybe rooting for ACC rivals in that sort of situation makes sense. But at the same time, from a philosophical perspective, screw that.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
It's counterintuitive, but I think that's sort of the reality of the modern business of college football or college sports in general, right? Because you have these balkanized, well, like you these cooperative media rights contracts, and I think you're right. There's not a lot of opportunity to increase the value,
Hmm.
at least obvious opportunity to increase the value without increasing the um, even if you increase the number of teams, let's because we know that Notre Dame's grant of rights for the ACC for its non-football teams that doesn't expire until 2036. The only conference that they can join without paying a massive buyout is the ACC until 2036. But if you look at the numbers behind their TV deal with NBC, and you sort of math your way into, and you also take into account the 2020 TV deal numbers when they were joined with the ACC, it doesn't add a whole lot to the payout. It really doesn't. Like Notre Dame's TV deal on average is actually worse than the ACC's, and we're already talking about the ACC's needing to be reworked to avoid a revenue shortfall.
Yeah.
So it comes down to like how much money, the 12 team playoff thing is going to happen. I think we're just uh, we're institution or like a corporatizing the process and taking a while, but it's going to happen. How much of what is the revenue gain from that? I think is one big factor as we move forward. And, time marches on towards 2026 and everything. It's the sports offerings of the various institutions. Is Georgia Tech going to add a couple more sports to keep up with the rest of the conference? Obviously, that requires a different source of revenue, whether that's from donations or sponsorships or whatever, as well, right? To increase sports offerings, especially um, considering that for Tech specifically, considering that they're at 17, while most of the rest of the conference is at 20 or 20 plus,
And it's
right?
hard to compare these, like, oh, why isn't Tech winning as many conference championships? Well, compared to the rest of the conference, we don't have all that many sports. But um, shoot, I was going to say something along the lines of that. I completely lost it in the meantime. Um, but no, there's only so many meaningful ways, like I said, to increase that. But you have to, like, at some point, you're like really splitting hairs too. If they go to splitting divisions, or because as much as I want to say, hey, like, we started a women's lacrosse team, that's going to mean more ad revenue or something like that. No, but the, other than adding teams, the only serious way I can say you can wring incremental value out of this contract is to say, hey, we're canning divisions altogether. The ACC championship is going to be a number one versus number two, or top two pod winners or something like that versus each other. And then you're saying, hey, we're going to get Georgia Tech, Florida State on the schedule every year. What does that mean for ticket sales and for marginal increase in general interest outside of, Tech and Florida State fans who would be diehards, but also hey, like, I'm a casual fan of one of those, and that's a rival, or the getting NC State and Duke on the schedule every year, Wake Forest, North Carolina. Like, there's only so many, I guess, like, edge cases like this that you can. Maybe Clemson, Virginia Tech. It's not that there's not a lot, but you're
It's
all
rough.
in the margins here at this point.
Right, and you only have what, 9 conference games to work with in
Eight,
football?
eight.
8 conference games to work with, right? If you even go to 9, Like it doesn't give you that much more room. You can
Well,
add the ninth, but it doesn't give you that much more room to get creative.
no, not at all. And I don't know that there's a good solution to it, and I know that's an unsatisfying way to tie up this discussion. So if you have a
Yeah.
better than that, please let me hear it.
What we should do is hear me out on this. Go independent and sign all just sign our own TV deals because that is a totally proven model.
Yes, that definitely worked the last time we did that.
Womp womp. Just to round out our discussion on potential revenue streams, Georgia Tech Athletics has started selling stinger passes for this football season, starting at $145 a pop for the upper level, and I think $165 for the lower level. I didn't actually read the website, so I'm going to do that now. While you talk about the value of a stinger pass.
I mean, I'm worried that people in Athens are just going to buy them just to get a guaranteed ticket. But I mean, it's revenue. Hopefully, hopefully, people who would otherwise not buy tickets see the value in it. And did you buy one yourself or no?
We are budgeting. It is part of a budget, so it will be purchased at some point.
Hashtag budget season. At least for upper deck, I think they put them first in the upper north. But don't quote me on that. So,
I do have the fact pulled up, but I'm too lazy to actually read through it. The upper level is 145, like I said, but the lower level is 245, not 165, like I thought.
That's a bit less good of a deal. So,
but it is for all 6 home games. True home games, I will add the UNC game does not count because that is at Mercedes-Benz. And the cheapest ticket that I saw through Georgia Tech Athletics for that was at $75, but we can debate the idea behind that creative pricing another time.
and with that, another 20-minute episode turned into 40. So,
we are really good at squeezing a lot of juice out of these oranges.
I mean, there's just so many ways you could go with that. And I guess tune in next week for the same conversation, but in a slightly different way. Now, we'll switch to previews here, right?
You're asking me. You're a part of this venture. You also get planning priority here.
All right. Well, then I'm declaring it. We're starting previews. We'll go spring sports first and work into fall.
But that's it for us. Yes, if you have anything else to add before we sign off here.
I got no plugs. It's time to go watch a movie and then get some sleep.
Cool. See y'all later.